Excuse me? Can we get started here? I'll tell you what, I promise you, if we get started, we can finish. All right? Okay, we're gonna. They'll put it up. So first of all, I'd like to welcome people, and as they come in, we'll just we'll find seats. But I want to start with introducing our dean, who is going to be offering some welcoming comments, and then I'll finish with introducing our agenda for today. Okay? So, Dean Angel.
Thank you, Robert. Good afternoon, everybody. We have a really sumptuous table back there full of wonderful snacks, and so I hope you'll help yourselves and enjoy this afternoon of celebration. I want to thank you all for joining us as we celebrate Professor Beth Glover Reed's extraordinary 50-year career and her lasting impact on not only the University of Michigan School of Social Work, but also the Department of Women and Gender Studies and the university more broadly. The scholarly work of Professor Glover Reed, who we often refer to around here as BGR and sometimes as the notorious BGR, spans the fields of social justice, feminist and multicultural practice, substance abuse, and intimate partner violence research. And importantly, her work wrestles with how to define and apply the idea of critical intersectional social justice, how people with diverse characteristics interact with multiple forms of inequality with a range of outcomes and consequences. This work is highly theoretical, yet at the same time deeply grounded in the real-world experiences of practitioners and community members. As I know will be amplified today, BGR has inspired generations of students, colleagues, and community partners through her scholarship, teaching, mentorship, and her commitment to advancing equity and social change. And I want to touch for just a minute on BGR's impact and reach as a teacher and mentor. Since the fall of 1998 alone, which happens to be as far back as our record-keeping system will go, Professor Glover Reed taught 89 course sections across 17 distinct classes, different classes, with 1,628 student enrollments. She also served as an MSW advisor to 220 students going back to fall 2000 and mentored at least 27 doctoral students, and I'm going to throw out just a few of their names: Emily Bosk, Lauren Reed, Lauren Whitmer, Lynn Nibel, Luke Bergman, Dave Doby, E. Summerson Carr, and Lorraine Gutierrez. Now, more than the numbers can express, and I happen to have learned already this afternoon that Beth doesn't really like the numbers very much, so just forget I talked about those numbers just now. Beth's students describe her as somebody who went above and beyond, who sincerely cares about her students and their success, these are quotations, and who meets students where they are. One student called her a, quote, brilliant gem, both academically and personally, while another described her course as, quote, hands down the most significant course of their educational development. This is but a small but representative sample of the accolades she has received from students over her 50-year career. Moreover, Beth's influence on the school's curriculum, core values, and national reputation is profound and enduring. We're honored to have 4 speakers with us today who will reflect on BGR's remarkable career and the many ways that her work has shaped our community and beyond. And during the reception, there will also be time for you to share memories and best wishes, and we invite everyone to enjoy light refreshments throughout the afternoon as we celebrate together. To launch us into our program is Associate Dean for Educational Programs, Robert Ortega, who's going to give us an overview of the agenda for the afternoon. Robert?
Great. Thanks, Dean Angel. So it's actually quite simple today. Each one of us has been given sort of a task, an assignment, and we've all taken it very seriously. We haven't rehearsed it, so there may be a little bit of overlap. I'm not worried too much about that. But we all are going to try to confine it to a very small period of time because we know we want to spend more time celebrating than listening. Okay, so we'll start out with Michelle McClellan, and then we'll go to myself, followed by Susie Antonow, and then we'll end with Lauren Whitmer. Okay, so I see Susie and Lori. Okay, great. All right. So why don't we go ahead and get started, and I will turn it over to Michelle.
Thank you. So my name is Michelle McClellan, and I first met Beth 20 years ago when I gave a talk at IRWIG, the Institute for Research on Women and Gender, on the history of women and alcoholism, which had been the subject of my dissertation. Then I came to work closely with Beth and with Jill Becker from neuroscience on interdisciplinary approaches to gender and addiction. And I will say that that work together was some of the most challenging and rewarding intellectual experiences I have ever had. Today, I'm an archivist at the Bentley Historical Library, which is part of the University of Michigan, and I work to identify materials important to the history of Michigan and to the university, and to collect those materials so that they can be available for research into the future. I've been working with Beth on establishing a collection of her materials, and so we've both been thinking about the scope of her career and her legacy. Now, if you know Beth, you know there's a diagram. And if you know the University of Michigan, you know there will be acronyms. So what I'm going to do is just talk a little bit about this diagram as a framework for Beth's approach. I understand those of you who were here earlier this afternoon may already have talked about it. And then talk about a few aspects of her career. So Beth offered this diagram as a way to conceptualize her overall approach. And you see the box on the left with the dashed border depicts the components of praxis. And just some key points. So I'm from the humanities, so this is not really the way I roll with a diagram like this, but I've learned a lot from Beth to think more visually. But I'm gonna say verbally just some of the things that I think are the key themes here to keep in mind. So this is iterative. You note that the arrows go in both directions. You can't work for justice unless you are able to see and analyze the forces that create injustice and have a vision for justice. In other words, you're not trying to just get away from injustice, but what are you going toward? Beth, as many of you know, is very interdisciplinary. She shared with me that she triple majored in undergrad, psychology, general science, and comparative literature, and once was assigned the same book in 3 different courses, but from 3 different perspectives. So that's just, she's carried that with her through her whole career. Now, most of her work also uses principles of community-based participatory action research. That's probably familiar to many of you in the room. You work with others with very different backgrounds, you are grounded in community, and you have action goals. Now, the box on the right depicts 2 other critical elements: to disseminate knowledge so that others can use and build upon it, and to try to institutionalize the work and changes you are making so that change is sustained. So now I'm going to talk about several different aspects of her career, particularly some of her early work on women and psychoactive drugs, and then on some of her work to bring about change within the university itself. There are lots of projects and acronyms, which I'll try to go through, but don't necessarily worry about keeping them all straight. What I ask you to do is just sort of appreciate the cumulative effect of this work and the ways in which they reflect, again, this diagram, that there's iteration here across research, policy analysis, training, that she's making change at the local, state, and national level as well as within the university. Always interdisciplinary, always working to disseminate and institutionalize. So even before she came to the University of Michigan, Beth had started to identify gender biases in trainings at Yale's Drug Dependence Institute and also in clinical work in New Haven. And in fact, she was hired at U of M to develop curriculum and field placements for addressing alcohol and other drugs. And within that, she was already looking to link to her interests in gender, race, and other differences. In the 1970s and 1980s, Beth handled research coordination across 5 different demonstration projects with 7 comparison groups. So that's a lot of projects to manage the research on, coordinate the research on. This was something known as the Women's Drug Research Project, funded by NIDA, the National Institute on Drug Abuse. She worked with planners, with activists, and they advocated for change suggested by the data emerging from those projects. The outcomes of this were substantial: 5 national trainings, 4 books published by NIDA, 7 dissertations from across the disciplines of social science and health, many different articles, and conference presentations. In the 1990s, Beth continued with this type of work. I'm getting some feedback. Are you all? Okay, thanks. So in the 1990s, Beth worked on a related project with the acronym PROUD, Policy Research on Women and Drugs, and here she examined the impact of the Women's Set-Aside in the substance abuse and mental health block grants across all 50 states. This project was funded by the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation in the late 90s. And again, it's really important to remember the context here. What does it mean to have women considered a special, separate population in the context of the history of women's health, where the alternatives risked women being ignored on the one hand or relegated to second-class status if taken into account on the other? It was crucial to examine the consequences and ripple effects of the set-aside approach, and to do so with some nuanced understanding of gender. So to have somebody like Beth Glover Reed doing that work was really, really important. Emerging from this were publications and conference presentations. She planned several national conferences. She helped create a national advisory group, developed suggestions for states about how to promote women's focused activities from prevention through support for recovery. In the 2000s, Beth worked on Women Co-occurring Disorders and Violence Study, WCDVS. This was another big multi-site demonstration grant project to develop and study interventions for women related to violence, substance abuse, and mental health. 14 sites were developing interventions, and 9 sites were implementing and studying the impacts of these interventions. So again, really big. They were looking in particular at violence and its trauma consequences in work with women, with children, and in research methods. Beth focused on qualitative analyses to understand how programs were implementing these approaches, what kind of barriers were encountered, and the successes that came out of it. So in sum, a huge impact on the national and state level, and really some of this very early and pioneering work looking at substance use and abuse through a gendered lens. Now here at the university, remember Beth, now I'm talking about some of her activism here at the university. So remember, Beth was hired at U of M to work in this field, to develop curricula and field placements, and students and local activists in Ann Arbor were waiting for her because their counterparts in New Haven had told them that she was on the way. When she got here, Beth realized that more was needed. Recall the diagram. So she identified a need to bring together and foster scholarly and training collaborations across multiple units, across disciplines, and across the professions. Now, when she served on SACUA, which is the Senate Advisory Committee on University Affairs, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute, but when she served on that, she recognized how often issues related to alcohol and other drugs arose in the President's Council. This was, things were happening, right, on the university, and there was really an absence of any coordinated policies. So in addition to developing curricula and supporting students and community groups, Beth worked hard and helped achieve 2 big outcomes in this realm. One was the establishment of UMSARC, the University of Michigan Substance Abuse Research Center. So this had a false start. Beth started an initial collaboration to connect these people working on these issues. It sort of died out, but later, with the support of the Associate Provost for Medical Affairs, it succeeded. She worked and helped to start what became UMSARC. She helped write pre- and postdoc interdisciplinary training grants, served on the executive committee, served on the training committee, and mentored many, many students over 20 years through UMSARC. She also initiated and co-chaired the U of M Task Force on Alcohol and Other Drugs to analyze the impacts of these issues in various components of the university. So this task force conducted needs assessments, held community meetings, produced a major report, and developed curriculum across the units. Now, women's studies. Beth was interested in keeping up with scholarship across the disciplines that centered women and gender, and intersectionality. How is gender linked with race, ethnicity, class, other dimensions of identity? She wanted to do this to inform her own scholarship and teaching, support students, and encourage change through pedagogy. Beth, therefore, supported curriculum development, including a seminar on feminist pedagogy to meet Rackham requirements at that time, and supported students who were seeking independent study credits. She presented and published on feminist pedagogy. She served on the executive and steering committees and helped to develop intersectionality-informed governance structure, really changed the way these units manage themselves, so to speak. She also served as the co-chair for a number of years in women's studies. Over the course of her career, Beth also engaged in lots of theorizing, remember our diagram, about how to get more recognition and resources for women, whether they were faculty, staff, or students. Using these insights, she brought together a diverse group of women across all categories and units of the U of M, and this from regents, deans, faculty, staff, and later students, the whole spectrum, to create a vision, to do a needs assessment, and to develop goals for change. This work was institutionalized in a number of ways, including the Women of Color Task Force, new policies about pregnancy, child care, and family support options, opportunities for recognition, including what became the Sarah Goddard Power Award, the Advisory Committee on Women's Issues, which was coordinated by CEW, the Center for the Education of Women, and all of these in a way fed into the establishment of IRWIG, the Institute for Research on Women and Gender, which is where I first met Beth 20 years ago. Then general faculty governance, Beth played a very important role in faculty governance and managed through that to infuse justice goals and insights regarding intersectionality and multiculturalism into governance, including such important elements of university business as the Michigan Mandate. Now, for those of you who are younger or more research to the university, I think it's important to note that the Michigan Mandate aimed to underscore the point that diversity and excellence are complementary and compelling goals for the university, and that the university would invest resources toward recruitment and creating a better environment on campus in order to increase diversity. She also worked on issues related to faculty compensation and athletics. So she was elected to be faculty senate representative by the School of Social Work. She was then elected to SACUA, that is the Senate Advisory Committee on University Affairs. It's like the executive arm of the Faculty Senate. She served there in the late 1980s, co-chair in the second year, and chair in the third year. And unless I'm wrong, I believe Beth was the first woman to chair SACUA. She also wrote a report on the status of women in the athletic department with a number of recommendations, and most of those recommendations have slowly been implemented. Beth also was central, I think, to several initiatives, faculty and staff against institutional racism, FAIR, and FAIR Teach that came out of that. The goals of this work included generating insights about how knowledge itself and classroom dynamics are racialized and gendered, and then incorporating those insights into resource materials, training sessions, and the implementation of the Michigan Mandate and the Women's Agenda. Beth used her knowledge of institutional change and group dynamics to inform many of these change efforts. The first versions of what became the Martin Luther King Symposium came out of this, also affected hiring criteria, teaching, and curriculum. FAIR worked with UCAR, the United Coalition Against Racism, which was another group, and other faculty groups. But I want to note here that FAIR itself worked more in collaboration with administrators as tempered radicals. And that example shows, I think, that a huge part of Beth's contributions are not just what to change, but how to make that change. So FAIR is a good example of a very strategic initiative with different stakeholders applying leverage in different ways. So as I hope is clear, you don't necessarily need me to tell you this, those of you who know Beth, but I think it's worth underscoring. Beth worked across many divisions that too often trip us up. Scholarship versus teaching versus activism, faculty, staff, students, community. She is one of the most genuinely egalitarian people I know, profoundly so. As a historian and archivist, I go back to the goal here of the diagram on institutionalize, and I gotta say, I'm a crier. I might tear up, I'm just giving you a heads up here. Beth understands how to make change and how to strategize to make that change stick. In our current historical moment, it is heartbreaking and enraging to see the attacks on the changes that she and others worked so hard to make. We owe her nothing less than to continue this good work. Thank you.
Wow, thank you. Again, I'm Robert Ortega. I'm Associate Dean here for Educational Programs, also on faculty. So, again, the assignments that we were given were sort of, they're a portion of different parts of Beth and Beth's history here. And so I had the pleasure actually of working with Beth from my infancy as a faculty in 1991. Actually, she was one of my instructors in my class because I was in the program as well. And so I'm going to just sort of like cover some of my experiences, but also some of what I know of Beth and some of what Beth shared in terms of her progression, her evolution of her thinking. And I'm going to stick with my scripture because I'll be here forever if I don't. Okay. So first of all, I do appreciate that Beth invited me to serve on this panel and to say a few words, especially about an extraordinary person and the extraordinary arc of her work. As a scholar, a group worker, a colleague, a collaborator, and a friend. As a teacher, an institutional change agent, and as someone whose career has been animated by a deep commitment to social justice. As I thought about Beth's career, it's clear that her scholarship did not begin in conceptual abstraction. It began in practice, in rooms often full of white male leaders and participants trying to understand one another, negotiate conflict, and create change under difficult historical conditions, but also who paid little attention to gender, race, and positionality. Before coming to Ann Arbor, Beth had already accumulated significant experience in group work and facilitation. In graduate school, she participated in mentored co-facilitations and training through the Midwest Groups for Human Resources, as well as through the National Training Laboratories. This was not quite quiet or neutral work. It unfolded during civil rights movements and the anti-poverty years, periods marked by assassinations, riots and rebellions, and profound national conflict. Beth was also influenced by faculty whose intellectual lineage reached back to the university's Joint Sociology and Social Psychology doctoral program, and through that to Kurt Lewin, whose work in field theory, force field analysis, and training groups helped shape to some degree Beth's inspiration for promoting a justice-oriented understanding of social action and social change. Lewin famously believed that there's nothing so practical as a good theory. In Beth's career, I think, she's beautifully demonstrated the reverse as well. There's nothing so theoretically powerful as deeply reflective practice. Beth recalls moments in her development that began to assemble the building blocks of her thinking. At the National Education Association, Beth worked with state associations in diversifying curricula and teaching methods. In Detroit after the uprising, in New Mexico with educators connected with the 19 Native American indigenous Pueblo tribes, and in Los Angeles during intense protest and unrest, she learned firsthand that group work is never simply about process. A pivotal moment came during a training for Cincinnati police. Beth had been trained in a co-facilitation model, usually with a senior person and a trainee. But when another facilitator became ill, she was asked to lead the group alone. Very quickly, she saw that the group dynamics were different from what existing theories predicted. That moment revealed a profound limitation in much of the group work literature. So much of it had been developed with white men as the assumed leaders, participants, and the norm. That experience helped set Beth on a path toward her dissertation, which examined the impact of leader gender on group development, member experience, and learning. Beth weaved the significance of power, race, gender, culture, geography, history, trust, and conflict at the boundaries between groups. She linked group dynamics to justice-oriented pedagogy, and core aspects of group structure, process, conditions, and leadership. But beyond that, Beth's work infused critical consciousness, intersectional and positionality dynamics, and contemporary understanding of the interaction between and within various systems across the micro or intrapersonal, interpersonal, organizational, and macro-oriented structures and processes that included policies and practices, but also structural contextual factors such as culture, language, and the historical transmissions of actions that affected the lived experiences of these community inhabitants. While here at Michigan, Beth and several collaborators and colleagues, including Charles Garvin, expanded the inquiry to critically examine race and gender and other social identities, social contexts, and social inequities. That connection between practice, theory, and social justice became the hallmark of Beth's work. Her scholarship on group dynamics, leadership, critical consciousness, implicit context dynamics, and interactional social systems was never confined to the written page. Yes, it resulted in multiple forms of scholarship, often in written form, such as her book with Charles, multiple chapters, and important contributions to social work and feminist intervention literature. But just as importantly, Beth engaged in many other forms of change through her teaching and large-scale institutional and organizational changes that we've heard about, that shaped how people thought, evaluated each other in annual reviews, and our focus on cultural diversity, inclusion, equity, oppression, and positive social justice. Beth's work introduced pedagogical innovations, how meetings were designed and functioned, how focus groups were conducted, how retreats were organized, and how institutional change was pursued. Beth understood that groups can reproduce power and replicate social inequities as members interact with each other, and groups can also become spaces of learning, courage, accountability, and transformation. Beth knew that institutional change requires vision, but also structure, values, iterative and reflective praxis, a capacity to thrive in complexity and uncertainty, to appreciate the perspectives of others through humility, passion, and patience. Within the School of Social Work, Beth's contributions have been both broad and sustained. In the 1990s, she was heavily involved in our implicit and explicit focus on minority-relevant work, promotion of special populations courses, anti-oppression efforts, and efforts to incorporate diversity and oppression into field-based learning. In the 1980s, she helped advance curriculum change as co-chair of the Race and Gender Task Force that took a hard look at how our School of Social Work and the profession framed the relevance of diversity and equity beyond race and gender. Beth worked tirelessly with faculty colleagues in our school, such as Howard Brabson, Charles Garvin, Mieko Yoshihama, Lorraine Gutierrez, Edie Lewis, and many other colleagues in women's studies, psychology, sociology, education, and other units across campus. She worked with student activists and helped launch school-wide practices such as multicultural orientation. In the 90s, Beth contributed to efforts connected with President Duderstadt's Michigan mandate that we heard about, with the MLK programming, diversity requirements, and doctoral education on race and gender issues and intervention. In the 2000s, Beth's work continued through intensive focused efforts, assessment projects, portfolio-based learning, field education reforms, and the development of social justice capacities. She helped ensure that social justice was not treated as a single course, a single requirement, or a single day of programming, but as something woven into curriculum, teaching methods, field-based learning, agreements, evaluations, and institutional expectations. Beth was an essential provocateur that fostered our critical intersectionality learning community and related disciplinary work, bringing together scholars and practitioners working across race, gender, religion, sexuality, age, and other positionalities. Again, the method mattered. Focus groups, common language, dialogue, mini-conferences, collaborative projects, and reflective frameworks that could travel into curriculum and fieldwork. What stands out across all of this is not only what Beth accomplished, but how she accomplished it. Beth's contribution were not episodic. Her work reflects an iterative process of awareness, reflection, revisionism, and structural change. It included persistence, perseverance, determination, I wanted to say disruption, but resilience and flexibility. And her legacy is not simply as an advocate for social justice, but how she did it. Through listening, structured dialogue, focus groups, assessment, collaborative planning, continuous reflection, attention to power, and structural systemic analyses. Beth developed processes that focused on justice that allowed people across differences to work together, name, confront, and move beyond conflict toward positive change. So today, as we honor Beth, we recognize a career that has joined scholarship and practice, theory and action, teaching and justice. Her legacy lives in her publications, certainly, but it also lives in the curriculum and field education and institutional practices and generations of students, and in the many colleagues who learned from her how to work across differences with clarity, humility, and purpose. Beth, this is my chance to say thank you for helping us understand not only how groups work, but how we all, with our diversity, can become vehicles for change. And Beth, thank you for including me and all who have come before me, and for all those who will follow. Thank you.
Oh, good, it's up here.
There you go.
Hi, Beth.
Howdy.
Of course, our presentation is not going to be as smooth as the other
No, it will not.
professors. No, it will not. So you have Lori and I up here. So wake up, everybody. But I'm not going to embarrass Beth, not today. Maybe later, okay? So Lori is going to begin with
Yes.
the focus of her work within the community and friendships and adventures.
I really want to start with adventures, but I'll tell you a little bit about the work first. Most of my review is going to be about her community-based work in southeastern Michigan and Washington County, where she started in 1983. But a bit about her history before that. Beth works better with my glasses out here. Beth was involved in fundraising activities for various causes during the college and had both clinical and community-based trainings and experiences in her master's and doctoral work, with full-time summer internships and 2 days a week during academic terms. She engaged in clinical work and training, worked on group models, worked in community work and anti-poverty initiatives, and worked with the Cincinnati Police Department to help screen and train police officers. Beth didn't start then, she actually started earlier. She started community-based activism by coordinating a softball league for girls. And she did that for girls 8 to 12 in South New Jersey for 6 years when she was 16 years old. She left it with a leadership team so it would continue. Does that sound familiar? It's got to continue. You want to
Yeah, sure.
talk
I can
about
take
the
it
Ann
away.
Arbor thing?
Sure.
Okay,
Beth
talk about
moved
Ann
to
Arbor.
Ann Arbor in early 1973 to implement a drug-focused curriculum development grant at the School of Social Work. So it was here. And she also had met with a gentleman by the name of Saul Cooper, who I remember him.
Me too.
Anyway, he was well known as a psychologist who was the director of community mental health. And he was involved in implementing very creative multi-level prevention and intervention. When she arrived, she was met, which we already talked about, when she arrived, she was met by representatives of drug help the local drug crisis center. She developed primarily, it was developed primarily by high school students and university students because a number of them knew she was coming. I can just see them all lined up. They also had been coordinating a community switchboard to help people find resources. A couple of other community initiatives and a large multidisciplinary course, Psychology 401. I think I took that when I was here. The focus was on drugs and society. And the team actually taught this course. The graduate students who initiated this course were approaching graduation and wanted to ensure that the course continued. So guess who took over? Beth took over the course from them, and with their help initially, and then she connected different parts of that to the university.
Always.
And in the community. Through various workshops. Beth always was putting on a workshop, okay? That was who she was. Beth identified everyone that could be located with a social work background focused on alcohol and drugs. A doctoral student, several recent MSW grads, community activities. She wanted them to identify possible field placements. She wanted people who could be field instructors and to get input about what should be in the curriculum. During this period, she served on a board. It was called the Board of Drug Help and Community Switchboard in Ann Arbor, and she provided informal assistance and coordination in conjunction with work with students. Woo, woman, you have a lot of stuff. Beth learned about gender-focused activism and resources initially, primarily through MSW students and those engaged,
Like us.
and those engaged in the 401 course and other community initiatives. Women's Crisis Center, early versions of what became Safe House, an assault crisis center. And there was a women's health initiative, which is where I came in, and many other rising groups. I met Beth, God, it feels like it's been 40 years. Oh, look at Dan, he's shaking his head, yes.
Oh,
It's
it
been
has
40
been.
years. And even though Beth has been doing this work for over 50 years, okay, I'm still her younger friend, okay? I just want to point that out, okay? I remember some of the work that Beth was doing with the Assault Crisis Center. And I also remember some of the goals and analysis that she was working on throughout my career and schooling with her. And some of that was, it's called Woman, you know, 'cause
Women's
she's got-
Center Detroit.
Yeah, okay. Which is a group of activists, and they had written a grant with Wayne County Mental Health Commissions for funds for an explicit feminist drug abuse program. Beth wrote the evaluation plan and served on the board until it was funded in 1974.
Next, she developed some common goals among women's feminist organizations. She recruited to conduct a needs assessment in the future of the Assault Crisis Center. Part of the community mental health group criteria was having feminist credentials, but not aligned with any of the women-focused organizations. Interviews and surveys connected with me, with major actors, and informed possible future directions and current challenges.
Okay. Are you here now?
Yeah.
Okay.
right here.
And Beth was addressing women's issues within alcohol and other drug centers. She moved to try and implement locally what was learned about women-focused approaches for alcohol, and drug problems, from early demonstration projects, goals to identify barriers, and methods to further goals. Beth had to generate interest and buy-in and some initial ideas at first.
Yep.
Because people didn't want to look at women and children and substance use. People,
At that time, she set up a women's service system advisory group that she coordinated in early years from 85 to 89. The coordinating project on women, alcohol, and other drugs was an implementation mechanism between 87 and 81 and had several work groups developing from that. Then she went on to conduct a number of needs assessments and evaluations of participating agencies.
Okay, 2 of the substance abuse programs, okay, Housing Alliance, adolescent programs, focus groups to identify diverse needs of women with alcohol and other drugs. And again, that's where I started doing most of my work with Beth, because I worked with pregnant women using alcohol and other substances. So we were all involved in this initiative to help women and children.
She conducted a number of needs assessments and evaluations in participating agencies, including 2 substance abuse programs, which is kind of where I came in a little bit too, Housing Alliance, adolescent programs, focus groups to identify diverse needs of women with alcohol and other drug issues.
The Infant Survivor Initiative Subcommittee on Substance, and you know, now they don't say substance abuse, they say substance use disorder, okay? So it was located in the Public Health Department. She conducted several needs assessment and generated ideas for filing gaps from 1990 to 1996.
She worked with the Safe Anchor Project and coordinated through EMU here in Ypsilanti, child welfare funds to explore how better to address alcohol and other relations. She also did the Wiser Steps program designed to create a community of practice and leadership among women with lived experience with alcohol and other drugs, plus with collaborations and coordination among community organizations, always connecting, no matter where you go.
She provided major conferences on trauma-informed practice, drawing from knowledge gained about trauma-informed approaches, plus resource materials developed locally in 2004. Now, that was part of this graph here. That would be theorize and analyze piece of it. Now we're going to go over the change. Uh-oh. And I just turned the
Here's
thing
change.
off,
Turn what thing off? Oh,
the graph.
oh, okay. Well, they got it. Okay, here we
it's
go.
a miracle.
All
Okay.
right.
So acting for change, which is what I'll start off talking about. This led to national projects and research described by Michelle. Later on in Wayne County, Beth worked with neighborhood services on several projects: fetal alcohol syndrome prevention, evaluation, and assessing the impact of the sudden closure of a treatment program in Flint. That was a big program.
Yes, it was. She conducted all-day summits, inviting teams from major alcohol and other drug organizations, and those focused on women's health, crises, gender-based violence. That's when she went on to connect all those different areas, which was so important, because before it was one little piece of women's work over here and one little substance abuse over here and psychiatry over here, and it's like she started working it together and making it happen.
So between 1990 and 2001, Beth gathered data from all these, and it was shared with county folk. That's how she put it. And within the coordinating projects mentioned above and below.
Right.
Her work overlaps some with the coordinating project, but with more focus on pregnancy and children, and more healthcare and child welfare system involvement. She did a number of trainings with direct service providers and convened directors across multiple communities.
She involved housing networks, which was another thing that came along and connected. I love that. Coordinated community resources with leadership teams of women and lived experience. She recorded teams of organizations from all over the country, including housing, homelessness, providing education, team building, and developing action plans. Okay,
Thank you.
shall we move on?
Yes.
Okay, you might wonder why I came here all the way from Florida today, which I did. And I did it for a very important reason. In the early 80s, it was recommended to me to call this woman named Beth. And I still remember in my basement calling on this phone, and I was kind of, I don't know why I was doing it, but somebody said I better talk to this woman. So while considering going back to school for an MSW from that point on, Beth became my advisor, teacher, mentor, and lifelong friend. Beth Reed is one of the most intelligent, you're not going to be able to stand this, but I have to do this, intelligent, dedicated, innovative, funny, trustworthy, and caring people that I know and love. Beth even reached my life more than you'll ever know and made this world a better place. Beth said on here somewhere, say something about an adventure or something, but I got a story here that's one of my favorites. Once upon a time, I look at these two young men. I'm missing one of the young men, but they remind me of my grandkids. These two young men, on a very cold Saturday afternoon, I took my then very young grandsons to the Hands-On Museum. After a fun but tiring time, we walked back and forth to the multi-level parking lot. Hand in hand, we walked over and over where I thought the car was. Guess what? Alas, it was not there. We proceeded to traipse around from level to level, certain that the car was just ahead. After going back and forth and up and down, we went on, exhausted, and I worried, but assuring them all the time that it was nearby and everything was fine. Oh, what a conundrum. We trudged to a nearby restaurant. I needed help. Who could I call? Beth. Beth lived close by. And sure enough, she picked us up. Oh, she picked us up and managed to figure out that car was actually in the look-alike multi-level parking lot somewhere else. Oh my goodness. Times haven't changed really. To this day, my grandsons consider that Beth saved our lives.
Thank you, Ori.
Thank you.
I know Beth doesn't, like a lot of attention, and that's why she had me up here, because she thinks I like a lot of attention. But anyway, I'm gonna say this to you because I think it's important that you do hear this and that everyone else hear this. You were so inspirational in my life. I never would have joined this university, pursued my career if it wasn't for you. When I first met you, I just thought, who is this woman? She had all of this knowledge in her head. And when she started talking, I'm like, is somebody following her? Because I'm not, I don't even know what she's talking about, But she had this passion, and this passion that I learned from her, that if I was going to work in this field, I had to put everything I had forward in order to become the best person I can be to help others. And at the time, I was working with women and children at St. Joe's Hospital, and Beth and a couple other people kind of took me under their wing. I felt like I was just this little bird with a broken wing, and they were just trying to help me out. And so they just took me to everything. And they would say, you're gonna present with us. And I remember Beth even asking me if I wanted to write a book. I'm like, I'm raising 4 kids. How in the heck am I gonna have time to write a book? But that's how Beth was, you know. She was very energetic, you know. She has so much energy and passion about the work in the community that she wanted to write it all down and share it with the community.
Tell them about the book.
Of course, I did not write a book, okay? And all 4 of my girls are raised very well. One is a social worker too, thanks, Beth. But I want to talk about this one trip, and then we have to sit down. Because we traveled a lot together. There were a group of us that traveled. And I would say the biggest trip that we went on was to Hawaii, you know. And I would always wonder, where is this woman getting all this energy from? You know, because all I wanted to do was sleep after, you know, them holding my hand on the plane for I don't know how many hours, you know. But I remember Beth always wanted to go and learn, you know. We had to hit every museum, and we had to, and you know, I'm a little hyper. I have a little ADHD, okay? It's kind of like, okay, great picture, okay? And then I want to move on. Beth is like sitting there. She's got a pen out. She's writing stuff down, you know, and I'm trying to get out of there. And then, but I love her because she would always try to find a way to fix me, you know. What can we do that you like, you know? And I love you for that, Beth. I love you for being a good friend over the last 40 years. I love meeting monthly with our breakfast group that meets in the evening now. I thank you. Thank you for all the work that you have done. You have set the path for all of us who work in this field. Oh, but I'm retired now. So, and I still don't have to write the book. All right, I love you, Beth.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lauren Whitmer. Beth was my advisor and dissertation co-chair. And I'm going to talk about how Beth has intentionally connected her scholarly and social change work to her teaching and all her work with students, and how she continues to tackle complex issues in innovative and interdisciplinary ways through this critical praxis framework. So Beth's philosophy has been to involve students in most components of her work. She has had field placement students on most of her applied research projects and several community-based projects as well. And also to help students clarify their own work and support student learning as much as possible. Students, she said, contributed hugely to most of the research, curricular, and community change projects she's been involved in because they bring important energy, perspectives, skills, and resources. And often projects ended up providing important opportunities to students for their own projects. Over the decades, you can imagine how many independent studies and research projects initiated by students that Beth sponsored, many of which evolved into new community resources, were important knowledge development projects, and included a lot of especially LGBTQ+ focused projects, feminist projects, and so many dissertations from across the university focused on alcohol and other drugs back when there weren't a lot of other people on campus with the knowledge to support those students. Feminist frameworks, participatory teaching, and work with a lot of joint doctoral students, especially those in psychology, sociology, and anthropology. As Michelle and Susie mentioned, Beth, early on in her arrival, she took over that big drug course. And I wanted to just share a comment from David Howell, who couldn't be here in person today, but who is now an oncologist. He shared the following memories about taking that drug course with Beth in 1977 as an undergraduate. So he said, the course included information on pharmacology, psychopharmacology, models of addiction, and addiction therapy and rehabilitation, U.S. legal history and substance regulation and social justice, political history related to substances, human development, and much more. Beth doesn't do anything halfway. There were a variety, no, I'm back to the quote. There were a variety of individuals from different disciplines involved in teaching the course. There were social workers, psychologists, lawyers, pharmacologists, addiction specialists, economists, drug dealers, and felons who participated. Dr. Reed asked me to participate as a teaching assistant for the course, which I did for 2 subsequent semesters. Being involved in this course was an important part of my undergraduate experience, and I'm forever thankful to Dr. Reed for this opportunity. Beth worked really hard to get prevention into curricular frameworks here in the School of Social Work, and taught so many courses. I won't name them all because we already counted them, but a few highlights are macro practice, multicultural interpersonal practice, changing organizations from the inside, women in community organizing, race, gender, and ethnicity and interventions, community practice, social group work, and several courses in women's studies. She was a lead organizer when the school developed our introductory diversity and social justice course, and she developed and taught the doctoral course on theories of change. That's a small sample of what she's done. Beth's teaching uses temporary social systems frameworks, so with a beginning kind of unfreezing period, a work period, and a period on reflecting and integrating. And she assumes lots of student responsibilities in her courses, and lots of student initiatives. So really working in the classroom to develop a culture of learning and change. And I want to share another reflection from Natalie Donlan-Sapella, who couldn't be here today, that really exemplifies how Beth's teaching carries on in her former students. So Natalie said, "From the very start, Beth saw something in me that I hadn't yet seen in myself. She hired me to work alongside her on projects that were as meaningful as they were formative. The geriatric field study, PODS-focused accreditation, the social justice orientation for incoming MSWs in 2006, and the portfolio process in collaboration with the brilliant Melissa Pete, who is also here with us today. She championed my work at IGR and helped me develop curriculum that I'm still proud of today. And in one of the most extraordinary experiences of my life, she and I, along with Betsy Vashel, who I think I also saw, traveled to South Africa to present at the International Social Work Conference. Beth gave me belief in myself at a time when I needed it most. She modeled what it looks like to lead with both intellectual rigor and profound humanity. She showed me that social work done right is an act of love. My friends who were lucky enough to know and work with Beth used to joke that we all wanted to keep a little version of her in our pockets because we couldn't imagine navigating the world without her voice, her wisdom, and her warmth guiding us. That joke was rooted in something very real, the fear of what it would feel like to not have Beth right there when we needed her. The truth is, we don't need her in our pockets because she lives in everything she's already given us. So, in case anyone is worried that Beth stopped working when she retired, let me assure you that she has not. And 2 very important praxis-driven projects that Beth is still actively working on are the Contested Spaces Project and the Homes Project. Both include core issues in understanding and navigating systems of power, how these are shaped by complex intersecting positionalities, and also how to change these while working to address immediate negative consequences. And both have heavily involved students and include components of community-based participatory action research. The Contested Spaces Project, which I've had the pleasure of working on since I started my field placement back in 2014. I did finish the field placement. I'm still working on the project. So the Contested Spaces Project examines why it's so difficult to address both intimate partner violence and alcohol and other drug use in coordinated ways, even though they frequently co-occur, the presence of one interferes with addressing the other, and outcomes are better if they're both addressed together in coordinated ways. There are many conceptual frameworks that are relevant in understanding these. Both fields are heavily gendered. So there are lots of issues specific to the fields, specific to the interactions of the fields, but they also represent common issues about how to bridge boundaries to address injustices and problems and to work toward justice. Beth developed the project to identify field-level barriers and learn from so-called positive deviants who are working to address both issues when most are not. The project evolved from issues that emerged in earlier women and AOD, alcohol and other drug-focused projects that others have mentioned. So being co-chair of the SAMHSA Treatment Improvement Protocol, tip 25, on this topic, which she found really disappointing. The outcomes of that were very frustrating. And a number of trainings that she did about people using the tip on both the alcohol and drug side and on the IPV side. She learned a lot also from local community work and the Women Co-occurring Disorders and Violence study. To give you an idea of the scope of these projects, the Contested Spaces Project includes a survey of 204 organizations, 36 comprehensive organizational case studies, and 18 comparative case study databases. And we are now working on disseminating findings through scholarly publications, developing and sharing examples of ways to bridge both fields in a more practice-focused way too, about tips how to do it, and working towards developing a continuing education certificate that would support people in doing this kind of work. Literally dozens and dozens of students, several of whom are in this room right now, myself included, have worked on different phases of the project as field placement students through work study, and Beth also conducted a number of independent study and mini courses on these topics. For the Homes Project, Beth was recruited by a community organization to conduct a survey using CBPAR methods for recruiting and interpreting the data focused on housing and LGBT+ older adults. COVID created some real complications, but they finished with 264 completed surveys from very diverse participants across 4 counties in Southeast Michigan. They then developed a community-based report, which was shared at a community summit, and they're now working on advocating for more diverse housing and supports informed by survey findings. Chris Kemp, a person who worked on the project, shared the following with me. Quote, "A fellow professor initially recommended me to Beth to do some data analysis consulting, helping out with quote, creating a few tables. A few tables turned into a 4-year-long collaboration on the Homes Project, in which we tackled some of the more difficult methodological challenges in survey data analysis. All throughout, I got to see Beth's tenacity and analytic rigor sharpen our analysis. I also got to see Beth broaden my view of what it means to be a scholar. Important as they are, scholarship is far more than publications, impact metrics, and grants. It's all about relationships built on reciprocity and building others up. Beth embodies that value to the fullest, and she inspires me to that value as well." So, in summary, Beth has been busy for 50+ years, and all of that busyness has been intentional and strategic and deeply rooted in praxis. So Beth, thank you on behalf of all of your former students for including us, for teaching us and pushing us and making us stretch our minds and our conceptual frameworks, and for making us do reflections even when we didn't always want to because we were busy with a bunch of other things, and who has time to reflect? But we are all much better for it. So thank you, Beth.
So, let me just check with time. So actually, we do have a moment for people to come up, and Melissa, if you'd like to, just to give some comments.
Oh, good. There's Kleenex here. So, Dan, you might be Beth's son. I'm her daughter. And it's amazing that Beth's done all these things and all these amazing roles, but I'm here to talk about her soul and how I would literally not be alive today, let alone in the world doing extraordinary things and have a 34-year-old son who's also in the world doing extraordinary things if it wasn't for Beth. So I'm going to talk about a moment with Beth where all the theory comes into breathing. So I was assigned Beth as my advisor when I entered the MSW program at like 28 years old. And I was a hot mess. She's nodding. She's nodding. And, you know, I was going to school full-time, working full-time, like raising my son, and single mom, and I was so tired. And so I somehow miraculously got a job teaching in women's studies to pay for, you know, health care and tuition. And by the way, I was the first MSW student they ever hired. And so Beth helped me sort of configure that into my field placement. Yeah, so I wouldn't have to add another thing. And so every week I would go into her office, and she'd sit there, and she'd say, "So how you doing?" And I would just, it's like dam would burst, you know? And I would probably, I sobbed. You know, it was just like this off-gassing. And she'd nod, and she'd nod, and she'd just listen and nod, not say anything. And then she'd like kind of push the Kleenex box across the desk. And then she'd like let me catch my breath, and she'd say, "Well, you know, if you have a minute, I have some questions about teaching I'd like to ask you." And I would be like, okay. And then she'd say, "Well, I was thinking about, you know, Pat Hill Collins and her 5 different types of power," and like, you know, and she would just go bonkers on theory, right? Like 12 of them at the same time. And then she was like, "I was wondering what, you know, how would you implement that with students, and how would you get them to think about their social identity?" And da-da. So she would just go full like fire hydrant, right? Here's the thing. For all of those who've ever had a hard time tracking Beth and I can have 5 conversations at the same time, completely tracking one another. So she would just flood me, and I would just be like, listen, listen, listen. And then this golden thread would pop. And all of a sudden, I would just have this cascade of ideas, and I would be like, "Oh, I could do this, I could do this, I could do this, and I could do this." And she'd go, "Yeah." And she'd pretend probably to be taking notes, but she was grinning. She was grinning. And so then I'd leave her office 30 minutes later completely fine. Completely fine. No longer broken, no longer like vibrating, right? So then we're in a year of this, and then I have to go to SOS Crisis Center for a field placement on empathy training, right? And the first thing I learned is I have no empathy. Well, I mean, I have it for my son, but it's like it's a thing, right? So, you know, I go through this day. If anyone here has been through the SOS Crisis Center day-long empathy training, it's a deal, right? Okay. So I come back enlightened about empathy, right? And so then a week later, I'm in Beth's office, and she's like, "How you doing?" And I'm just like, right? And she nods her head, nudges the Kleenex box, and she says, "You know, if you're up for it, I have a question about teaching." And I say to her, "Why don't you empathize with me? I mean, clearly I'm in pain. Like, I don't get, why don't you empathize with me?" And she said, literally this completely changed my life. She said, "Well, other than letting you off-gas your acute pain," she's like, "the reason I don't empathize with you is because that's just going to take you deeper into your pain. And the reason I ask you questions about teaching is because you have a brilliant mind. You have one of the most brilliant minds I've ever encountered. You can take incredible complexity and distill it down into this practice that literally changes people's lives. And you're going to be pacing that pain for the rest of your life. You got like complex PTSD. I didn't know what that was, and didn't matter. And she said, in the meantime, you have gifts to bring to this world, and the world needs you. And I was like, oh, okay, let's talk about teaching. And it took me years to realize that that one conversation is now the single thread that connects my entire life and everything I do. So my superpower in the world is I go out and help people find people who don't think they have any skills, any knowledge, any capacities at all, zero. I help them find it, and it has nothing to do with their training. It is their innate intelligence. And Beth, you gave me that, and now I give that.
Oh, you're not going to do it?
She just did it. Good afternoon, everybody. I am Dan Reed. I am proud to be the only son, the only child of the notorious BGR, which I had heard whispers of the notorious BGR before, but when the dean introduces her as the notorious BGR, I feel like I can now say this out loud. This is wonderful. I can't wait. So how many of you, just by a show of hands, how many of you have been students or advisees of my mom? Okay, that's what I figured. Well, for as much as you all have learned from her, I'm here to tell you I am her #1 student. At least if you measure it by like time spent, right? I haven't taken any of her classes, although I have sat in the back of many classes, which I was reminded of from some of her colleagues, you know, doing something, you know, and I was 12 years old, about the age of my kids. But I've spent a lot of time with my mom, and as you can imagine, she's taught me a lot. And in her spirit, I wrote down a 3-part multi-dimensional diagram that I was going to present with a lot of arrows, but I decided, you know, the AV was too complicated, you know, but I'll simplify it for you. There are 3 components to it. The first is my mom definitely infused her very particular set of skills with me, right? To quote the great Liam Neeson. We heard about it, we've heard a lot about it today in a lot of different ways. My mom is brilliant. She has a brilliant mind. She has an unconventional mind. She makes connections in ways that many people don't. She thrives in uncertainty and the gray. She said it, she hates being in one lane. She likes being in multiple lanes and being interdisciplinary. And I saw that, I experienced that. She taught me how she does that. You can imagine what it would be like for her to grade your 7th grade social studies paper, to like give you feedback, you know? It's like, well, have you thought about this? And well, you made this point here, but then there's a thing here, and what do you think? And you know, through a lot of that, you really taught me how to do what you do, which was amazing and incredible, and a skill I use every day. But it's not just that. She showed me what hard work looks like. You all know how hard she worked. You heard the voluminous amount of stuff that she did, and the people that she touched, and the impact that she put in the world. And I saw that every day. You know, my mom always had like 19 different projects going on at any one time, in addition to whatever was going on in my life, and in addition to whatever stuff was happening in her life and our family's life and all of that stuff. And she just was so energetic and powered through it all with a smile most of the time. Sometimes I saw the not smile. And, you know, in retrospect, it's amazing all the things that hearing it all today, it's amazing all the things that she accomplished with all the energy and all the hard work. She taught me how to be empathetic and to be kind, which I think is also another hallmark of my mom and how she shows up. It's funny, even in talking to people, Mom, I've been talking to people who've been organizing this for a couple weeks now, but the people who are organizing this are like, you know, your mom is kind of tough. Like, she's got a lot of opinions on what this thing should be, but she's so, but they led with, she's the best. You know your mom is the best. And it's because you know, she's so kind and so empathetic, and you know she cares about you. And so she can tell you really hard things because of that. And, you know, I could go on and on, but the very particular set of skills that she has, I just feel so fortunate to have received all that from her and apply that every day. And every day I do, I recognize that it came from you. And so thank you for that. But that's only the first part of my 3-part framework, okay? That's part 1. Sorry, Robson's like, can we get to the third part? Part 2 is her values, okay, right? And you know my mom feels very deeply, you heard it, about justice, about fairness, about equity, about equality, about race, about gender, about substance use disorder, which is a new term. I've heard about substance abuse a lot as a kid. You can imagine, again, you're in 6th grade just trying to eat dinner at the kitchen table, and your mom is talking to you about the intricacies of feminism and critical race theory, right? And even though we didn't always name it that way, and you know, I remember I read about critical race theory, I'm like, oh, what's that? And I read it, I'm like, oh, I know this. You know, this is like intrinsically what I understand, how I view the world. And so she lived those values, she was all about impact. There were all kinds of people that came by the house, all kinds of students and faculty and folks in the world that she easily navigated within because she was driven by her values and driven by her impact and this passion to lift up those that needed lifting and those that were marginalized and deserved justice in the world. And that's how I was raised. Those are the values that are deep within me, and I certainly hope as I continue to live my life that I make you proud in how I implement those values that you taught me. And she tells me when I don't, just so you know. You're not surprised to hear that. But I hope I do it more than I don't. All right, so that's the second part. And the third part is, on top of all of that, on top of the last hour and a half of accomplishments and things that she did, what we haven't talked about is she was and is a phenomenal mom. Okay, that goes beyond just teaching me skills and teaching me values. It's being mom, right? I always felt like I was her first priority, no matter what. Sorry, you guys, wasn't you, it was me. Schlepping me to soccer practice, helping me with my homework, helping me deal with like confused biracial kid in middle school stuff, right? Which she was, by the way, very well suited to help me with. And just was always there for me. I never had, even though that she had so much going on, I always felt like she had time for me. I had never had a want, I never had a need, and she always found a way to sort of integrate me in her life. Like I said, I was in the back of a lot of lectures and classes. I was joking with Robert that I considered the Freeze building, the old School of Social Work building, my personal playground. I would slide down the ramp and kind of kick the ball in the hallway, and we just made it work. And so, Mom, I thank you for, on top of all that, just being a wonderful mom and now a wonderful grandmother to her 2 grandsons, Robson and Marvin. They know her as Nana, in honor of her Nana. And so I'm just grateful, and I'm proud to be your son, and I love you very much. And we are looking forward to your retirement. I'm not sure what that really means for you. Instead of the 19 different projects, maybe it'll go down to like, I don't know, 7 or 8. But we can't wait to continue to spend even more time with you and help you and be by your side in your next round of adventures. And as I thought about how to honor her, I reflected on, throughout my entire life, many of you individually, but so many, hundreds and hundreds of students and faculty that she's worked with have come up to me. They figured out I'm her son, and they come up to me and they say, kind of like what I said, oh, your mom is amazing. You have no idea. How could it, like how great it must be to be her son and this and that and the other. And I thought, and she's never there, of course, when those conversations happen. So I thought, well, it'd be really nice to actually pull together something that allows her to hear all that from all the people that would say that to me. So, sorry, Mom, I reached out to probably about 100 so people behind your back over the last week. to pull together a video of just people giving you your flowers and giving you their testimonials and talking about how you impacted their life. And don't worry, I'm not going to show it here because also, number one, it's an hour and a half because we had over 50 people submit videos. So more people than years served here at the university, right? Which is an outpouring of love and respect and appreciation for you. And there was one video in particular that I was going to show, but it was from Melissa, and she just said it. What I thought was that particularly captured the nature of the stories I hear around how you impact so many different types of students and how that multiplies through the work that they do. Anyways, I've gone too long. I just want to say, Mom, I love you. Thank you so much for everything. And I'm so glad that you're being honored today at this special retirement ceremony. Thank you all for being here to support my mom.
Yeah. So Beth, do you want to do a last, like? Oh, okay. All right. You don't like that pose? Okay. Oh, let me see here. Actually, okay.
I was going to say, I hope I can talk after all of that. It's been totally wonderful to have people I haven't seen in a while all here and coming from some distance to do that. I think I wanted just to thank everybody for putting this all together and putting up with me for not wanting to do it. And I guess I really want to say I didn't do any of those things you described by myself. They were all done in combination with lots of other people, many of them sitting here, and Robert and I, and more than once, Robert has said, Beth, calm down, and patted me on the head, and Kathy and Bill Hilligus here, and other people from the community, and folks over there that I worked with in a bunch of places, and Colleen came from Colorado. I'm sort of overwhelmed about all that, but and I also just wanted to say the person that hasn't been talked about, if I could design a daughter-in-law that lived up to everything I value, I got one. And they're doing a great job with their children, and I'm very proud of all of you. So I wanted to say a few words about my grandmother. This is her locket. And she was a social justice warrior. I had a number of very strong women in my childhood. I didn't really want to lead the lives they were leading, but they were amazing people. And this particular grandmother was a social justice warrior. And she used to rage about, all the churches and synagogues that were fighting each other and building all these big buildings, and people were hungry. And I hear her voice in my ear pretty regularly. And it was a weird town to grow up in with two institutions for people with disabilities and mental disabilities, and they had so I got exposed to a lot of things early, and can't remember a time that I wasn't thinking of and seeing injustice happening, and that I was supposed to do something about it. So I just wanted to say thank you, and I've been a tempered radical in terms of trying to work through the system, and not outside, and you can't do that by yourself. So I wanted to thank all of you who have helped over the years and made my life as rich as it has been and as exhausting as it has sometimes been. And thanks so much for those of you who did all the work of pulling all that stuff together. You did a great job.
Stay up here. We can do this together.
Okay.
This glass is for you, Beth. I was told this was your special glass. It doesn't have any poison in it or anything.
No, it's mold. It's a mold. I can't drink wine.
All right. This is probably apple juice anyway. Okay, so here, let me come to the mic, but you can stay up here with me, Beth. Okay. So, as I think has been sort of referenced throughout the afternoon, this is an event that was very much long in the planning, and many, there were many gatherings and conversations about how to do this in a way that felt right to Beth. We began to kind of refer to this event as BGR Palooza. Because it became sort of a big event, and I would talk with Robert. Beth would go, and she would talk with Robert, and I would say, "What's wrong? Like, what is?" And he said, "Well, Beth really wants. She doesn't want it to be about her. She wants it to be about the work, right? Because the work is what's important to Beth." And so today has been about the work. So we have had a chance to learn about the work that Beth was so passionately engaged in. But we have also, and maybe it's not what you wanted, Beth, but we have also learned a lot about you, right? So we have learned about you as a scholar, and that's where the work is, but we've also learned about you as a colleague, as a person, as a friend, as a person who believed in people and figured out how to lift up their strengths, even when they were sad. We've learned about you as a mother. We've learned about you as a grandmother and as a mother-in-law. And so so I think we all got what we wanted in BGR Palooza, which was that it's about the work and it's about you, because those things are the same. Those things are the same, right? They're not separable. So Beth, I ask us all to raise a toast to the notorious BGR, a scholar, a mentor, a teacher, a champion, a friend, a mother, a grandmother, but most of all, a champion for critical intersectional social justice whose legacy will be strong and far-reaching. Hear, hear. All right. Thank you, everyone, for being here. I know that you want to have a chance to visit with Beth and to wish her well, and so we will sort of wrap up the formal program. Please help yourselves to any last snacks. And then please do also, if you wish to leave any of your written memories on the sheets provided on the tables, they will be treasured by Beth along with that video that she gets to look forward to watching soon. So thank you, everybody.